Welcome to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Kentucky attorney Jeff Roberts has over 25 years of experience. He'll provide answers to your questions related to personal injury and automobile accidents, workers' compensation claims, and Social Security disability benefits. Let's join Jeff for this episode. Well, Jeff, welcome back to the studio. Today we're going to talk about tractor-trailer accidents and some safe driving techniques and tips that you can recommend to people. Obviously, you're a personal injury attorney. You do this for a living. You represent injured victims, but I would imagine you'd rather see them down at Kroger rather than in the ER or later on in a case somewhere. Just, these things are devastating when they happen.
They are, and you're exactly right. I'd much rather see individuals at Walmart or Kroger as opposed to seeing them here in my office after they've had an accident. In fact, nearly every past client of mine has heard me at the last time when we do distribution in the case tell them that I hope to see you out sometime, but I hope you never need my services again.
Absolutely. And so there are a lot of things that go on. I mean, as summer gets out, everybody's excited. We're trying to get to different places, maybe going on vacation or just in and around town, or we might be going down to the lake for a weekend or whatever. And, we're distracted, all that other stuff that kind of kicks in. But these trucks, I mean, they're doing this all the time. They're 24/7. And just the mass and size of these trucks make it much more difficult for them to maneuver when you're kind of zipping in and out and darting in and out. So part of that, I guess, is just being aware that their reaction time is much, much different from the car you may be driving.
Yes, exactly. And, whenever you're out on the highway driving down the road, when you're either if you're going down an interstate or you're going the same direction as the semis or semis coming towards you on a two-lane road, for instance, you've got to take into account that they cannot maneuver on a dime. They cannot maneuver as fast as a motorcycle or a car or a pickup truck can maneuver. They cannot stop in the same distance that you can stop in those types of vehicles either. So, and I see it frequently on the interstates because the nature of what I do, and I handle cases all over Western Kentucky, and I go to Nashville for doctors' depositions, and I go to Frankfurt for things, I go to Louisville for cases, etc. And so I'm on the interstates quite a bit, and I see cars that will pass a semi, and I mean just as soon as their bumper clears, the rear bumper clears the semi, they're cutting right back over, and sometimes it's not even completely clear, and they're cutting right back over. And then, and I see it where I can tell the cars in front of them are already braking, and then they cut right back in front of a semi and have to get on the brakes, and that semi is going to have to get on the brakes even harder to stop in those type of settings, and it can have fatal consequences or very, very serious consequences for individuals if you're not careful on what you're doing.
Right. And I know when I was learning to drive, one of the things my parents and my grandfather taught me was, if you're going to merge in front of somebody, you may see them in the side view mirror, but wait till you see them in the rear view mirror. Then you've got a little bit more distance there, and be aware what's not just the vehicle you're passing, but what's going on. Like you said, the cars up in front were already hitting brakes, and if I'm accelerating to get in that lane and suddenly I've got to brake, that truck can't possibly maneuver safely.
Well, exactly, and I think that's good advice, what your parents told you about making sure you can see the other vehicle in the rear view before you start to merge back over. I'm a big fan, and apparently a lot of new cars do not come with blinkers, but I'm a big fan of using blinkers to let people know what you're going to do when you're traveling down the interstate. And it more and more you see people change lanes without ever using the blinker from that standpoint. But if you're getting over, you should make sure you got plenty of room before you ever get back over. But if you got your blinker on, at least the truck driver, the semi-truck driver, or the other person knows that you're coming over, and they can start either giving you room. I think a lot of people are fearful that the person's going to close up the gap or something of that nature if they do that. But, there's idiots on the roadway. That's just There's no two ways
just
about it.
Just not paying attention.
And but you need to be when you're driving down the road, you need to be careful of everybody else on the roadway. you also need to be thinking about your own safety. And if you've got an idiot that's going to try to close that gap, he's going to try to close that gap. And if you start merging in and he tries to close that gap, you're going to have a lot less time to react to that than if you give the blinker and then you see he's going to act. I say he, because unfortunately, most likely it is. But at least from my experience, I will say that. But that's a situation where at least you have a little more room to protect yourself in that regard if you've got somebody who's going to drive like that.
Well, and like you said, for some reason here in Kentucky, that blinker seems to be an optional thing. One thing we've talked about in the past is as the season change and it gets closer to summer, I always remind my kids to go into AutoZone or some place to get their car checked up and fill up the brinker fluid. I mean, it's very, very important. It is fun to send them in and get them to ask for that. I think it's sold in the 5-gallon.
Yeah, I have seen those videos, and it is funny to me to watch those. But if I were the young child that was being sent in there, I probably wouldn't think it was so funny. My daughter, I didn't even think about that, or frankly, I probably would have done that to my daughter at some point in time. So she's probably glad I didn't know about that.
Works
joke
every
until
time.
then.
Works every time. I got a bunch of nephews too.
Yes.
So no, that's good. The other thing is, as these trucks, because again, they are generally hauling some pretty heavy equipment or whatever they've got in the box truck there, or whatever they've got in the trailer. Tends to be heavier stuff. And when they hit an incline, I mean, they're going to slow down. They're going to slow down fairly rapidly if you're not careful. Now they try to deal with that. They're trained to deal with that. But if you're following too closely, that thing, I mean, you may not even see the brake light. It's just the weight shifted a little bit, and they're slowing. So give them some room.
Yes, the brake lights are only going to come on when they hit the brakes. So if they are slowing down because of the incline and not because of the braking, which is what's going to happen in that situation, brake lights aren't going to come on. So you're not going to realize, unless you're paying attention, you're not going to realize that they're slowing down from that standpoint. So if you're driving too close to the rear end of a semi truck or a pickup truck hauling heavy weight, is going to have the same situation, not quite as bad as a semi, in all likelihood. But if you're driving really close and you're not paying attention, and all of a sudden they're going 70 mile an hour the highway speed, and then they hit a steep incline, like at Mount Eagle down in Tennessee. When they hit that steep incline, they're going to start slowing down. They're going to start slowing down fairly rapidly in some situations. And so if you're not paying attention, you can be up underneath a semi pretty quickly in that setting and have disastrous consequences.
Catastrophic. And I think you and I have actually talked about this in the past, but they do have those underride guards in the back of a truck. It's called a Mansfield bar typically, and that is supposed to kind of give some protection so that car doesn't get up under there. But if it does, I mean, it's probably going to be catastrophic, maybe even fatal.
Yeah, they're supposed to have the underride protection, and I haven't noticed any in a long time that did not have that underride protection on the rear end of the semi trailers from there. So I think most of those have even been retrofitted, some of the older ones, to have that safety device on there. And that's one of the things that have developed over the years is the safety devices, and that's the civil litigation system that I'm a part of. It has been instrumental in getting a lot of the safety things developed for vehicles and other areas of our life as well, from that standpoint. So that's one benefit to the civil justice system is we identify dangerous conditions and identify alternative ways that vehicles can be designed or things can be made safer. And it has led to, at least in my opinion, and I think the statistics would show that, to a lot of the merchandise we use in a lot of vehicles on the road being a lot safer than they would have been without the civil justice system.
Right. No, that makes absolute sense. One of the other things that, if you've been driving for any period of time, I mean, you've probably by now had the experience where you're trying to merge over and somebody's right there in your blind spot, and it might be just behind the passenger door, backseat passenger door, or even the driver's side. You just can't see them. When somebody's driving a tractor trailer, I mean, that space is much larger. In fact, I recently saw a Facebook meme of all things that showed a small vehicle in front of the semi and then off to the sides and around the trailer and in the back. The view is somewhat restricted, although they do have some other sensors and other things these days with the technology inside the cab or inside the tractor itself is advanced. But again, riding those blind spots, better just to kind of get out of the way.
True. Yeah, you do not need to ride in the blind spot of any vehicle, for that matter, but definitely not a semi, because the blind spot, as you said, is substantially larger for those. I remember it's been a long time since I took my driver's test, but I remember when helping my daughter when she first started to learn to drive and getting the driver manuals and going over that with her, and it showed in there in that driver manual the difference in the blind spots for the different types of vehicles, which is good. Every driver, young or old, needs to be aware of that from that standpoint. And we talk about the blind spots, and if you most vehicles, I believe nowadays, the newer vehicles have a blind spot mirror on the side mirrors.
Lot do.
From that standpoint, but if yours don't, the vehicle I drive did not come with a blind spot mirror, and you can buy those that are add-on, and those blind spot mirrors have saved me from pulling in front of somebody that was in my blind spot when I was going to go past. Well, if I was in the right lane and going to move out to the left lane to pass a car in front of me, and when I looked in my side mirror, I couldn't see them in the normal side mirror, but my blind spot mirror showed that vehicle there, so I could see that vehicle was there. And I've had people pull out in front of me at times in that regard. And during my lifetime, I've pulled out in front of others when I didn't see them in my blind spot. But those blind spot mirrors, if you don't have those on your vehicle, you need to get some.
You can pick them up just about anywhere, right? They're just adhesive, more or less. Yeah.
You can pick them up at Walmart, I know, AutoZone, O'Reilly's Auto Parts, Napa, all of those places. You can find ones that will fit your side mirrors, and you can place them where they don't obstruct your view any other way, and they can be very helpful in avoiding collisions.
Absolutely. The with the advent of summer, I mean, we all think sunshine and great days and hot temperatures, and we're all going to get out there and have fun. But we also have a lot of rain showers during the summertime, and the problem with that is the road and the pavement gets slippery. And so again, stopping distances are important, and also sometimes you're going to have obstructed views because of the rain. You just can't see. So turning on those headlights, it's a big deal. So a lot of people think, well, I can see fine. It's not about you. It's about the other cars being. I see a lot of black and gray cars that don't use their headlights when it's raining, and you just can't see them on the road in many cases. And that's more perilous when you're around a tractor trailer, I would think.
Yes, obviously you want the tractor trailer to see you when you're driving down the road. If you're going toward it, if it's going to make a left-hand turn, it takes them a long time to clear from that. So if you're coming toward them and you don't have your headlights on and it's raining hard,
foggy,
foggy or whatever, if they can't see you and they start that turn, and then your stopping distance is increased significantly because the roads are wet in that regard. So it's just safety, and nobody goes out and intends to be in an accident, but those things should come into play. A lot of vehicles have automatic lights on if you have them on that setting.
Right.
From that, a lot of them have running lights as well that can help in that situation. But the headlights themselves are much brighter than running lights. So if you turn your headlights on, the vehicle is much more likely to see you that you're going towards than otherwise. And then the same if you got your lights on, running lights don't have your tail lights activated. And so if you're going down the road and somebody's coming up behind you, if it's a really foggy condition, they shouldn't be driving fast. Don't get me wrong. Or it's really raining out there. If your tail lights aren't on because you think, well, I got my running lights on, they're automatic. The cars coming up behind you
they don't see those.
They're not going to see that. And if you hit your brakes, your brake lights will come on, but they're not going to see that until either you hit your brakes or they get real close to you, and it can end up if you have to. If you're slowing down or just letting off the gas, they may not see it and come up to you on a faster speed. And the goal is to avoid being injured, and even if it may be the other person's fault, if you can avoid the injury, because even if it's the other person's fault, you're the one that's feeling the pain from your injury,
Yeah.
not that other person. So
Yeah.
making sure you're taking care of your own safety the best you can is something you need to think about.
Well, and that comes another tip that my dad gave me, and I've really coached my kids on this, is that if it's raining, if your windshield wipers are on, your headlights ought to be on.
Yes.
And I do it enough that I actually say it out loud, especially when my kids are in the car. Now they're all the driving age, but it's just one of those little things. I want that to be instinctive in their head, so they always hear that if my windshield wipers are on, my headlights need to be on, and that's just a good safety practice.
Right. It is. That absolutely is a good safety practice. And, you know, turning if the wipers are on, and even if you got them on intermittent where they're just barely wiping, if they're on, having the headlights turned on is a good thing to do from that standpoint. And no matter how low the rain is, how slow it is, once that pavement gets wet, it's wet.
Right.
And in a real slow rain where the pavement isn't real wet, it may not be as likely to hydroplane, but your stopping distance is still increased significantly. So, if you have to turn your windshield wipers on, not only turn your headlights on, but increase the distance between you and the cars in front of you.
Right. And this is not a bad time, especially if you've got young drivers at home, to probably go out and check the lights, check the tail lights, check the blinkers. I mean, if I pull into, I'm up in Louisville, so if I pull into Valvoline, that's one of the first things they do is they do a headlamp check and a blinker and a brake light check. And I think even if you're not going to go in there, at least every so often, take somebody with you and just say, hey, let me just check my operating lights and see how things are going. That can save a lot of problems, because it may not always just be a tractor trailer accident that you're involved in. It could be a fender bender down here on Olive or something like that, because you just didn't have your lamps, in the lights they're working.
Yeah, and that's true. And most people don't check their lights from that standpoint. They don't know they got a tail light out until
How would you know?
until somebody else tells them they got a tail light out. So checking that periodically, and frankly, when a lot of folks, when they see somebody with a tail light out in front of them, they don't know who that individual is, so they ain't got a way of telling them you've got a tail light out. Now, I've been known to pull into a gas station when somebody's pulled in and tell them, you probably don't know this, your tail light's out. I had a state trooper one time that pulled me over when I was going home. It was during the wintertime. I was going home. It was dark out on my way home, and my headlights were working fine. I'd had I don't know if it's fuse short. I can't remember exactly what it was now because it's been too many years ago. I didn't have any taillights. The brake lights would work when I hit the brakes, but the taillights didn't come on with the headlights. I had no idea that he pulled me over and ended up just giving me a warning for that. Luckily, I wasn't real far from the house at that point in time, and then the next day I went and had it taken care of. From there, but if he hadn't pulled me over and said your tail lights weren't working, and I have no long how I don't know how long they had not been working before he'd pulled me over, and since then I've kind of I probably don't do it as often as I should, but I will periodically go out and crank up the vehicle, and I'll turn the blinker on and make sure it's working, turn the other blinker on, make sure front and back are both working, and check the tail lights and headlights and brake lights, make sure everything's working like they should.
Well, and that's one of the things. If you don't do that routine maintenance like that, here in Kentucky, the state troopers, the sheriff deputies, the police officers, they're very friendly, and sometimes they write you a little note to remind you that your taillights are out, and that can be an expensive little deal. But thanks for the reminder.
Yeah, yes, exactly, and it is against the law to drive without the tail lights working and all of that. And
or if you're pulling a trailer, same thing.
Yes, pulling trailers especially. I've seen that so many times. Yeah. And sometimes it's the lights on the trailer aren't working. I've seen a ton of times where they're just not plugged in.
Yeah,
it's either the truck and the trailer don't have the same plugs for the lights, or what it is. I don't know. They just may say, well, I don't need. I'm going to be driving in the daytime, so it doesn't matter. But that's what operates the brake light, so people behind know the brakes are there. And but yeah, trailers without working lights is something that you see way too frequently.
Right.
And I think it doesn't seem to be. I think it's getting less than what it was at one time. I think people are aware of that now more than they used to be aware of it, but it still occurs too often.
Yeah. And the thing about a lot of these pull behind trailers, sometimes they're very low to the ground. It's not like a horse trailer. It might be a flatbed trailer of some sort. So just even seeing the daggone thing
Yes.
at times can be challenging.
Yes, that's
And,
true.
and that's always now. Obviously, if I'm a truck driver, I've got a CDL license, a commercial driver's license, and I've been through extensive training on how to operate this vehicle. And there are safety requirements as well. Do you want to kind of go through some of the safety requirements they may have? I mean, this can come down to equipment, like we said, headlamps and stuff like that, but also brakes and different things.
Right. They're supposed to, a CDL driver is supposed to go through their vehicle, do a pre-inspection check.
Just like a pilot.
Yeah. And before they get on the road, they're supposed to look at that and make sure everything is working right, check the brakes and all of those things from that standpoint. And do they always do it? I'm sure they don't, but they're all supposed to do that every time. And it's for that very same reason is that, not having brake lights can be very traumatic or can cause significant damage if they're not operating. The same with headlights and blinkers and all of those things. It can cause really have tragic consequences if it causes an accident in that regard. So the depending on the type of vehicle, commercial vehicle it is, they're supposed to have certain decals and things that make them more visible as well. Like if you're behind a dump truck, you'll see the conspicuity markers or something like that. I can't remember the term they use for those, but it's to make them more visible, especially at nighttime, where your headlights will illuminate that and you can see
Kind of like
that
a reflective sticker of some sort, right?
reflective stickers.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. And so those, the semis are supposed to, in any commercial vehicle, is supposed to have all that type of safety equipment, and it's all supposed to be working properly in that regard. And unfortunately, sometimes employers slack in that regard. And the other thing with semis and even personal vehicles is the tires need to be properly maintained, have proper air, proper tread in that regard. And we've all seen the tread laying on the side
Big
of the
strips of black
interstate.
rubber out there.
Big
Yeah.
strips of black rubber laying on the side of the road where retired tires on semis have come apart and they're laying on the side of the roads, and that can, if they come up, they can cause a wreck for the vehicles traveling behind those. But then also that tire is now very, very unsafe.
Right, very unstable, and that could cause a lot of different issues for the truck driver himself or herself. It doesn't matter. It's still a very dangerous situation, especially if you're driving around them.
Yes.
Jeff, are there some basic tips as we kind of wrap up the episode here? Are there any other basic tips that you can think about? I mean, you've been involved in a lot of these types of accidents. Unfortunately, some of them are fatal, and you get these wrongful death claims that come along with it, and they're just tragic for the family. I mean, it's a life-changing situation, but sometimes it's a matter of the driver wasn't thinking, meaning the truck driver wasn't thinking. Sometimes it's carelessness on behalf of the car driver or the motorcycle driver who just really didn't think in the moment, and that decision had dire consequences.
Correct. And when you're talking about a semi, the consequences of a collision are much greater on average than two passenger vehicles are, because of the weight of the vehicles and how slow it is to stop those types of vehicles in the force involved in that type of a collision from there. And you see it, some are solely the fault of the truck driver. Some aren't even the truck driver's fault. It's the fault of their employers in not properly maintaining those vehicles.
Preventative maintenance.
Yeah, sometimes it can be the fault of who loaded the trailer. So there can be a lot of different people that are at fault on the side of the semi. You can have the driver of the passenger vehicle that is at fault in causing the collision, and sometimes it's a combination of everybody.
Right.
A lot of people like to think that when there's a collision, one person's at fault and nobody else is at fault. And a lot of times, it's more than one person. There's more than one cause. There's multiple different things that come together to cause this collision. And in Kentucky, we have pure comparative fault. So if the truck driver is 10% at fault, they pay 10% of the damages that the injured person has incurred, and if somebody else is 90% at fault, they pay 90% of the damages that they caused in that collision. So, that is, and that's the way it ought to be, in my opinion. A lot of states, when I went to law school, a lot of states did not have pure comparative. Kentucky has had pure comparative for a long time, whereas whatever percentage your fault is that caused the collision, that's what percentage of the damages you have to pay, and that's the fair way to do that. If somebody is 60% at fault and somebody's at 40% at fault, the 60% shouldn't have to pay 100%. The 40% shouldn't get out scot-free. And so letting them pay their percentage of what they are at fault is the fair and just way to do it, in my opinion.
Well, and as we said, just the damages, whether it's the property damage to the other vehicles, whether it's the damage to life and limb, those medical bills are going to be substantial. And if you've got a situation where you've now got comparative fault coming into play, and well, yeah, you share some of the responsibility, those bills are going to be pretty astronomical for many families, and that can be a problem.
Yes, the medical bills are, they're significantly greater than what the liability limits are in Kentucky now, in my opinion. The mandatory insurance law, I believe it was 1977. I'm old, but I'm not old enough that I was practicing back when that law came into being. But the $10,000 of no fault coverage, the $25,000 of property damage and liability coverage have not changed since then. And back in '77, $10,000 probably went a pretty decent ways in paying medical bills.
Right.
$10,000 doesn't cover a lot of emergency room trips nowadays.
Well, especially if there's a life flight involved because the accident happened somewhere out on the interstate.
If there's a helicopter involved, it's not even covering 20% of that bill.
Yeah.
From there, but even going to a local emergency room at a hospital, you're nearly always coming out $8,500 or better in medical just at the emergency room visit, and that's if they don't do MRIs or CAT scans and all of that. It's not uncommon. I see the emergency room bill exceeding $10,000, and then all that medical coverage from the car insurance is already gone at that point in time. And I handle cases that got one going on now that the medical bills within probably 3 months of the accident, the medical bills were over $250,000.
Yeah.
And that's just, in the nature of the injury determines how much medical treatment. Obviously, it's going to need to be there from that standpoint. But when you're the greater the impact, as a general rule, not always, but as a general rule, the greater the impact, the greater the force involved, the more significant the injuries are going to be, and the more significant the injuries are, more significant the medical bills are going to be.
Right. Friends, we don't want to bring you down or depress you on this. Hopefully it's a bright, sunshiny day when you're listening to this, but it's serious business out there. And it's one of those things that from time to time, we like to take some of these podcasts and really turn them into more of a PSA type announcement to remind you, driving's a great thing. It's a privilege and a right we enjoy, but at the same time, it's serious, and we need to take precautions and not rely on everybody else being the safe driver, and we'll just do whatever we want. I hope you have a wonderful summer. Jeff, I hope you have a wonderful summer yourself, and hopefully get out to the lake and just enjoy ourselves. But the reality is, let's get there safely and let's get home safely. And I think that's the best way to leave it.
I agree with you, and I hope everybody has a great summertime, and I hope you have a safe trip.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeff. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Roberts Law Office Injury Podcast. Jeff will return in 2 weeks. Until then, he invites you to visit jeffrobertslaw.com and follow his firm on Facebook. At the Roberts Law Office, you'll find a history of small town service and big city results.